Hello, today I'm going to be talking about my family exploration paper. Now, I was very excited to have the opportunity to have this conversation with a person that's very important in my life, my grandmother. And just to give a little background on my grandmother, she's around 60 years old now, going on 70 years old. She is an immigrant and she's the first generation in my family in the United States from the Dominican Republic. And I don't get to talk to her often. Right now I'm in Romania, so I haven't seen her in 2 years. So getting to involve her in my life a little bit and have this conversation with her was a great experience for me. So that's the background on my grandmother. She's pretty much the glue to my family, right? So I talked to her and I wanted to ask her about rituals. And a big ritual in my family is on Christmas Eve, or Christmas Day more or less, we wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and we go down and we open up presents and we're all super tired. And I asked her why she started this ritual, and her response was that she started it actually when she was young, and she watched her mother cook a very big dinner the night before Christmas, and she would wake up early and watch her and her siblings open the presents, and she pretty much just wanted to continue the tradition and have it with her family and do it with my mother and my siblings as well. And I also asked her, how does culture play a part in our family? And she says culture plays a big part in everything that we do in our family, and our heritage and pride are all we have, and it is our duty to keep it alive in our households. And I completely stand by that. I mean, everything that I do is influenced by my upbringing and the values that I was taught at a young age. So that pretty much brings me into the cultural variability theory. And I believe that the cultural variability theory can be applied to my grandmother's way of thinking because it shows she has those dominant values and beliefs associated with her culture, and she's not afraid to show it. The cultural variability theory is important because it shows there are so many different people in the world with different backgrounds, different cultures, especially in America. Now, going back to my experience and tying it into my grandmother's experience, is that I've spent a good amount of time in Europe, and being around these other different countries, I can really see that the United States is the leader of the free world. And it's a cultural melting pot, and it remains that day. It remains that way up until this day, right? So a little example for you is a person raised in Australia is always going to have a different view of the world than a person raised in Colombia, for instance. And that's just because the different cultures kind of shape the way that we think and heavily influence our decision making. I went on to ask my grandmother questions related to the social information processing theory. And I want you to listen to some of her responses. So I asked her, what do you think about meeting people online? And her response was, I think it's quite scary. You never know if the person behind the screen is who they say they are, which I think a lot of us can relate to. Maybe the younger generation, not so much, but personally, I didn't start using a computer really until I got into high school. I just didn't do a lot of stuff with technology. So, and also going back to my grandmother's standpoint, she's from a different generation, so it's probably a lot more scary for her than it is for maybe myself or you. And I also went on to ask her some more questions, and I asked her, can you have a healthy online relationship? And her response was, I am sure that there are people out there that do have healthy relationships online, but why go through the trouble of putting yourself through an emotional roller coaster without knowing exactly what type of person you are getting? Also, another thought that I think is well versed. I think that a lot of people think the same way, and we're kind of moving as a generation more towards comfortability with meeting people online and talking to them, and kind of it's becoming more of the norm per se. Now, as far as working relationships and friendships, it's in my grandmother's generation, those were pretty much done all in person, except for maybe use a house phone to call up a friend, but it's not like you're hopping on Facebook, MySpace, anything like that in her time, which would be the 1980s, right? You're not gonna hop on MySpace to meet up with your friends. You'll maybe call them on a house phone and meet up with them that way. Now, as far as the social information processing theory, generational differences also contribute to the way that we think and our level of comfortability with stepping out and maybe talking to someone online and being more comfortable with like communicating with a person online and being comfortable with that difference between talking face to face and talking online. Now, the social information processing theory looks into relationships formed by means of CMC, meaning computer mediated communication. This can be via social media, other websites, and websites that allow you to share or have conversations with another person. Now, the key to this theory is the emphasis on the use of only verbal cues, because there are no nonverbal cues. You don't get those nonverbal gestures that you would when you're talking to a person face to face. The way two people communicate without the use of nonverbal cues can have a huge impact on the relationship between those people. But I think I think for the most part, my grandmother and I thought very like-minded on these types of on these situations that I've asked her, going back to the cultural variability theory and how I tied that into her life, as well as the social information processing theory. And I think her responses and my responses, maybe they matched up a little bit, but at the same time, you can tell the generational difference, and you can kind of tell her responses are influenced more by her culture and her generation. Now, going forward, maybe we should think about how important cultures and how their different opinions really put the world into perspective. Because if you're looking at something from all angles, that really can change your view and open other people's eyes to, hey, maybe we can think about it, look at it this way. As far as talking to people online and opening up and moving forward with this new technology, you got to understand there's going to be some pushback. Some people aren't used to talking that way. Some people aren't comfortable talking that way, and that's perfectly fine, okay? Some things to think about going forward. But I think as a whole, we can do a lot better with kind of respecting people's boundaries, understanding where they come from, and understand the reason why they are indifferent, maybe have a bias against certain situations, and we can go forward and accommodate for that person going forward.